we will go ahead and get going here. Welcome everyone to our January, technically not First Friday webinar. Today we have Kelsey Murray here talking about sustainable activism and self-care practices. I will give a little preface here that everyone's having Wi-Fi issues this morning. And so we're just going to do our best and hope that we can get all the way through it. But with that, I will go ahead and share her presentation for her. And then Kelsey, you are free to go.
Awesome. Thanks, Becca. Appreciate it. And my Wi-Fi is being randomly leave. It's not because I pieced out. It's Wi-Fi is mad. So I'm going to keep my camera off and hope that we can kind of prevent some Wi-Fi crashing. Okay, so good morning, folks. Happy Friday, we made it, yay. Thanks for joining me today for this talk. Like Becca was saying, my name is Kelsey Murray. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the coordinator of student wellness and survivor advocacy at Linfield University in Oregon, as well as the Oregon representative for Northwest NWACUHO. First, I want to start off with a land acknowledgement. Before going into Linfield's actual land acknowledgement, I wanted to share some words from Summer Wilkie and her essay, So You Want to Acknowledge the Land, some notes on a trend and what real justice could look like. She says, let's begin by acknowledging the land. If you want to sincerely acknowledge the land, go to it. Put your hands in it, put your feet in it. The soil is alive, the microscopic communities in it remember everyone who lived here. They shaped one another. Go to the forest or to a prairie or a creek. We're lucky to have little green places and public spaces. This is where you acknowledge the land, away from the walls, concrete, and lawns. She goes on to say, until action is taken to identify and empower Indigenous people, land-based justice is carried out and inaccurate history is no longer taught in schools. A land acknowledgement statement feels mostly empty, even belittling and alienating. Next slide. Thanks. So Summer Wilkie makes the point that words without action aren't enough and can be harmful. So I wanted to provide with you some actions that you can take or you can advocate for. Actions you can take advocate for are you can set money aside each month for recurring organization. Do you have any change university to land grab university? Because it was not our land as white people. Grant. Actions institutions can take is returning university land to tribal caretakers, provide free housing / tuition for students attending their ancestral tribal land as student affairs practitioners and humans. Next slide. So now I'm going to go into the land acknowledgement for Linfield University in Mcminnville, Oregon. So we are located on what is the traditional territory of the after the 1855 of the Confederated Tribe of Grand Ronde. Everyone was encouraged to invest their time and resources to learn about the tribes whose land we inhabit. It goes on to talk about how we can get involved in our local Indigenous population, such as visiting their cultural shop at Native-owned businesses, support Native nonprofits. Lucky that we have access to the Chachulu Museum and Cultural Center at the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. And so that is our land acknowledgement that I wanted to share with y'all. Feel free, if you would like, you can copy and paste your land acknowledgement if you have one in the chat, but just kind of a time to honor that land. Okay, so kind of getting into the meat of this presentation. So today I will be presenting on sustainable activism and self-care practices. About halfway through this session, I'll be asking you to check in with yourself and answer some questions on your own. If you reflect by writing things down, please have something to write with or write on. Towards the end of the presentation, I'll be sharing 2 fillable PDF worksheets that you can fill out, or you can download and then print them. If you're wanting to fill them out on your computer, make sure you download them first before opening them in your PDF reader, open them with your PDF reader, not your browser, so you don't lose that work. I think we've all done that before, maybe just me. And then I will also be asking you to reflect on different aspects of your work, which in this context of the presentation means work you get paid for, unpaid work such as childcare, caring for dependent family members, as well as work if you are a student. If you have questions, feel free to unmute and ask your question or type it into the chat, whatever you feel comfortable with. And there will also be a chance to ask questions at the end of this presentation. And then I do want to make a note that the 2 worksheets that we'll be using during the session were adapted from the Oregon Sexual Assault Task Force's prevention training. So I do want to thank them for that. Okay, now learning outcomes. So we have 3 learning outcomes for this presentation. Describe the individual relationship level strategies of sustainable activism, create a self-care plan that is both realistic and flexible, and then identify individual and relationship strategies for care. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to start off with the definition of the 4 foundational concepts of sustainable self-care. These concepts are vicarious trauma, burnout, compassion fatigue, and activist burnout. Next slide, please. All right, so vicarious trauma is the significant shift in your worldview. We all have these core beliefs that we hold strongly to, but when experiencing vicarious trauma, these beliefs can be super altered or even damaged. So some examples of that are experiencing lingering extreme feelings of anger or sadness about another person's traumatic experience, one's ability to stop thinking about the trauma of others, and experiencing a loss of hope or sense of purpose. And something I do want to make note is that as housing practitioners, you respond to a lot of trauma. It can be in a conduct meeting, it can be in a duty call, it can be with an RA. There are a variety of ways that you are going to experience trauma. And the definition of activism that we are going to be using today does apply to your work as a housing practitioner, because you are being an activist for students, hopefully for marginalized populations, and maybe also outside of your work, you're doing activist work. So I did want to say that. Next slide, please, Becca. So I think something that a lot of us, regardless of the work that we do, are experiencing is burnout. We were kind of just talking about how there's just not a lot of energy to do a little bit extra because we are all burned out right now. So many of us are reporting exhaustion from the pandemic, the political climate, social injustice, and environmental hazards. I know in Oregon last year, we had a fall that was just on fire, and then an ice storm, that created a lot of stress. So the type of burnout that I'm talking about right now is outside of that more common burnout definition. It's kind of that extra. The type of burnout that refers to physical and emotional exhaustion that helpers can experience when they have low job or school satisfaction and feel powerless and overwhelmed about school. Symptoms of this type of burnout include alienation from work-related activities, headaches and stomach aches, because I think it's important to remember that stress impacts us physically as well as emotionally, emotional exhaustion, and reduced performance. And this may look like getting disproportionately upset about a small thing that happens at work. I know that was really big for me when I was super burned out at my job. So it's good to take note of those things. Next slide, please. All right, so now we have compassion fatigue. This is known as the cost of caring for others, and it's for people who are helpers, which is what we are as student affairs practitioners, and also maybe in our personal lives. So when you are in a helping profession, especially when you're working with those experiencing trauma, you may start to see an erosion of your emotional and physical being because you're unable to refuel and regenerate. I know I've talked to a lot of people who their breaks, their weekends, I'm sorry, I have a cold, they're not able to refuel. They're not able to kind of get that space because they have so much refueling to do. And so as we get into that compassion fatigue and that caring, it really starts looking like the reduced ability to feel empathy or sympathy and or hypersensitivity or insensitivity to emotional material. Think about your responses that aren't your normal everyday responses, such as thinking as someone's trauma isn't as serious when you are in a trauma response work. Next slide, please. All right, so the last concept we're going to discuss is activist burnout. Reminder that being an activist looks differently for each person. You can be a volunteer activist, it can be your job, you can be answering a phone for a crisis line or working in a community organization. So activist burnout is when activism related stress becomes so overwhelming that it debilitates the activist's ability to perform their activism effectively or to remain in their activism. So it may look like difficulty participating in or enjoying everyday normal life activities, anger and frustration, helplessness or hopelessness, feelings of shame or guilt about one's inability to affect societal change. All right, next slide. So here are a couple of assessments that you can use. We're not going to go over them in this presentation, but I wanted to kind of give you those tools. There's the Professional Quality of Life Scale, which can be found online, and then also a provider resilience phone app that's kind of handy dandy to have at your side when you need it. So feel free to take a look at those if you would like in the future. And then on the next slide, Becca, I have these 4 questions. They're check-in questions that I want you to answer. Feel free to write them down, think about them. If you want to put them in the chat, you can, or unmute yourself, whatever you feel best about. So the questions are, while I'm at my best and most balanced in both my professional and personal life, what do I notice? What does being my best look like? When I'm starting to experience some burnout, compassion fatigue, or vicarious trauma, these are things I might notice about myself. Ways that I take care of myself or sustain myself that are working well, people and resources that help me take care of and sustain myself. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to take a look at that. Feel free to play some music, feel free to turn off your camera, whatever feels best for you. And we'll kind of come back together in maybe 3 minutes. All right, I think I'm gonna try to turn on my video and see how this goes. All right. So next slide, please. If you're still working on those, that's totally fine. So let's make a plan. I want to give you a few tools to sustain yourself. So I'm going to walk you through identifying some individual and then some relationship level strategies. So relationship level strategies, these are things that you can do by and for yourself or with a little help from a friend, like the Beatles said. You can ask a friend or family member to like watch your kids or pets or your plants. Just things that you can do with a little help. All right, I'm going to drop a bit.ly in the chat. That will take you to a fillable PDF that you can download and then fill it out. Go ahead and do that. Let's see. So I want you to read through the strategies, which are grouped together in themes, and identify the strategies that work for you or you believe will work for you. Again, I'll give you a couple minutes. What?
It's telling me that I cannot access it because I'm not in the Linfield directory.
That's mean. Okay, I'll fix. Try now.
Try like actually reopening it.
No, rude.
I don't know. Barbara Vanessa, is it letting you in? No.
No, it's not. It's giving me the same error message.
Try.
Same here, Kelsey. You're doing great, though. I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Yeah, it's super relevant and useful information, regardless of whether we can do the fillable.
That one worked.
Yay.
I'm in.
Yay. All right. So go ahead. You'll see there's check boxes that you can check. So I'll give you a minute or two to do that. Remember, download it. right. How are people feeling about time? Do they need another minute?
I'm so sorry, Kelsey. I'm a little, all of these, I want to check them all. So are we just kind of picking a couple of things that we don't already feel like we're doing and like as a kind of commitment?
So just things that you already do or you would be interested in trying.
Okay.
And if it's all of them, cool, awesome. All of those things are really great.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Becca, if you want to go to the next slide. Okay, so now that you've identified a few or a lot of individual level strategies, I want you to ask yourself these questions. So how will I know I've met my goal? What will success look like? How many times a week or month will I engage in this strategy? How will I track my process? Who can I ask to help me hold me accountable, and how? And then how will I celebrate my successes? What milestones along the way can I celebrate? So kind of looking over what you checked off, feel free to reflect, whether it's writing or just thinking about it. And you can maybe identify a couple that you would be interested in kind of pursuing, and that you can kind of identify those goals, those mile markers. And again, feel free to turn off the camera, hang out for a minute or two. All right, next slide, please. All right, just a reminder that it's okay to revisit and revise your goals along the way. It's not like a one and done, I did it, or like I'm never gonna do it, so I'm just gonna scrap it all. No, we can change that along the way. You don't have to stick to a strategy also that isn't working for you. Try it out, and if you're like, no, don't worry about it. Cool. Throw it away, keep moving on. Give yourself permission to struggle and learn along the way. I think that's something like super important, especially with our student leaders, to just remind them it's okay to struggle and then learn along the way. Okay, so this next worksheet, hopefully this one works. So it is relationship level strategies. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we may need others to sustain ourselves, and that we owe it to those in our lives to help sustain them as well. Sustaining relationships can include partners, family members, friends, chosen family, colleagues, co-activists, etc. Anyone in your life, really. So feel free to download that. So this worksheet will have you answering questions, identifying pre-written strategies, possibly creating your own strategies. You'll see some blanks there that you can use, and then also plotting your allies on a quadrant. The quadrant can be a little confusing, so kind of give some definitions about what those quadrants are, and those intersections of the quadrants. So feel free to ask questions if you get confused. But I wanted to give you a little bit more time than the other worksheets to get this done, because it's more like writing. I'll give you a couple minutes for that. All right, if you're still working, totally cool. But I'm wondering if anyone wants to share some like insight that they had or something that they want to explore or pursue, something that surprised them about either the relationship level strategies or individual level strategies that they identified.
I just have to say, like, there's a lot of content here, and it is really wonderful to take a moment to actually think about the stuff. And usually you're in the space of putting out fires and or like you know, just, I mean, today I'm right after this going into a meeting, which is like, you know, assessing something that what worked, what didn't work, how can we move forward? But I think oftentimes we're doing that from like strategy and operations side of it and less about, you know, your personal needs. So this is really, it's really interesting, and it's an ability, it can give you the ability to be really honest and real. Because I think all of us have probably had the last 2 years of being more reactive, defensive, and burnt out than we would like. So I don't know if I have that much to contribute, just that I feel like I'm going to take some of like these sheets after today and actually spend some time on them.
Thank you for that, for sharing that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, feel free to please download these, distribute them with your staff, with anyone. I know, like, I've used this with RAs before, but I think as full-time staff, we often just spend so much time caring for others that we don't think about caring for ourselves in like a sustainable way.
Yeah, I'm actually going to bring this up in our team meeting, because they're like, burnout has been always a thing, but I think it's just ramped up. Sorry, my son's homesick, so Pirates of the Caribbean are going on in the back. But also I think it's something that you can, I mean, your whole operation and everything you're trying to do in terms of res life is only going to be more resonant and have more traction with students if you're filling up your own cup first. So it has a real practical application too.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I said earlier in the presentation was when you are kind of feeling really burnt out, your efficiency is lowered. And that's so many universities. The bottom line is really important to especially the upper admin. And so this is just another, like, if we take care of ourselves, you benefit as well. I think that's important to remember. Did anyone else identify anything that was interesting or surprising to them? I know, Bob, you said that the mindfulness is so important. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Bob, go ahead.
it's okay, Vanessa. I don't have too much to contribute. I just wanted to like speak to kind of the things that I've struggled with the most, I think, during the pandemic is like just trying to escape. Like it just feels like every time you turn around, there's more news, more sad updates, or disappointing decisions made by the government, or whatever. And the thing that stood out in the previous document that you passed along to me was like getting off the phone, and I just feel like screen time has been through the roof, and I don't like it, and it's been really hard to try and escape the screens. And I feel like that's directly correlates with usually how my stress is how much time I've spent on and staring at a screen. I don't know. So that's been kind of my experience, but all of these things are, this presentation came at a really good time for me, Kelsey. So thank you for not knowing that you didn't know that I needed this, but I did. So thank you.
I got you, Bob. I got you. Vanessa, were you going to share something?
Yeah, I can't remember now. I'm just totally with Bob on what he was saying about screens. And yeah, and well, oh, I remember now. I think sometimes the personalities that tend to lean into professions like this and really get into the meat of relationships, like with students, and your sort of caring caregiver personality types. And I think with that comes like a high level of sensitivity and a high level of feeling, you know, when something's not right in a situation, or where there's something that perhaps it's a student that's not totally sharing with you, but you get a gut sense that something's going on here. But that, I mean, I think this is extra relevant because those things are also hard to let go and shift, and, you know, and then have that separation between work and home and coming home. And I really noticed that, I mean, thankfully I have an amazing family, but I definitely come home grumpier and take it out on them with, like, you know, I have 3 kids and I'm trying to be present for them, but really I'm thinking, yeah, you know, like or I need to go have a bath, or I need to just be by myself. So it's hard because ultimately, you know, those are the relationships that sustain us, like you said. So it's hard when they take a beating because of what we do for a living. So. But also it's like it's both our strength as caring people. It's that double-edged sword, because it's our strength and it's our, I don't want to use the word weakness, but it gives us that extra layer of, we have to bring the self-care.
Thanks for sharing that, Vanessa. I'm a new parent and struggle with that right now too, because you give it everything you have all day, and the people that ultimately really should matter the most is the people you come home to, and it's really hard to want to dig deep, and well, it's just hard to dig deep and give them the love that they should get when you get home, right? And it's like, how do you, I guess I've been trying to find that, like, how do I give as much as I can at work because it matters, but not so much that it makes me tired when I'm home, because that's not, I don't think how work should. I shouldn't, you know, what matters most isn't the work. It just isn't. It should be the people you come home and love. So it's, oh my gosh, it's so hard.
Y'all are doing great, I'm sure. I think, Bob, you like that saying that you work to live, not live to work. We're here to live life, and the work that we do is important, but it's not our world.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot of thinking around that. Like, I never want to be in a job where I don't have that energy for my family when I get home. Like, nothing's worth that. Nothing's worth me coming home and being exhausted, right? And for me, that's my priority, is to have a little bit, lots left when I come home. So yeah, it's more days than not, I expect myself to still have it. So it helps when your child is adorable and laughs and smiles and kind of gets you that energy back. But yeah.
I totally agree. And I'm sort of moving into the next level, Bob, where I have twins and they just turned 13. So they're in high school. And anyway, it's just as demanding, but totally different. Like, but I also have to say, it seems like it's all about balance, because so prior, like, I was home full time with kids for 8.5 years before I came back to work. And I felt such gratitude for going back into a place where I could use where I could wear a hat that wasn't mom, and really challenge myself intellectually and in terms of my like personal growth. And but what, I don't know, I had a friend say to me, well, you can only do 100%. Like, you take your like classic pie, right? And you can only do 100%, and then that's just it. But you realize in these moments that what's being asked of you is actually 200%. Like, it seems. So how do you, I don't know. And I think that back to the mindfulness and those grounding moments where you can slow things down a little bit and maybe like put a bit of a filter or a sieve on the energy that's outputting, at work. This is something I'm playing with. I have no idea how you do it, but like just try to temper it a little bit so that you're still authentic and you're still bringing caring, but you're not actually completely emptying yourself so that your family, doesn't get anything. And I think that's like, it sounds great intellectually, but that's like a moment to moment mindful practice. I am no expert, just saying.
Well, figure it out, Vanessa, and write a book, let me know, and you're set.
Oh,
I'll write a book and then everyone in Northwest NWACUHO will have to purchase it.
What?
Becca's in. Becca likes it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. I think also being kind to yourself when you aren't able to leave work at and you do be kind to yourself when that happens. Obviously, best case scenario is like, all right, I leave work at work, bye. But be kind to yourself if that does happen. And just keep working on like building in that time, maybe at the end of the day, maybe 15 minutes to do one of these practices. So you kind of leave it there, do a practice, and then go home. Commute. So I have about an hour commute, which is I'm weirdly thankful for because I have an hour to be like, I can't believe that happened. That's so frustrating. Or like, I didn't do my best work right there. And I can kind of reflect and do that in that hour. If you don't have an hour commute, kind of build in that time throughout the day to do that. Okay. Hey, Becca, next slide. Here, another slide. Yay. Okay. Okay, so remember that you need to support yourself in order to support others. Vanessa said that you can't help fill other people's buckets if your bucket is empty. But hopefully you've identified some people and activities or tasks that can help you sustain that. Because activism work must both be sustainable for the activist and the cause. So for ourselves and our students and the mission of our department, the university, and the work that we do. So what questions do you folks have? You don't have questions?
No questions. Your students are lucky to have you, Kelsey. You're good at what you do.
Thank you. That means so much. Well, I really appreciate y'all, and hopefully you got something out of those worksheets. I think there were 2 more that were included in my workbook that I got about institutional level support. So holler at me if you want any more of that. Happy to share that with you. And then Becca, if you go to the next slide, it has my contact information. If you're ever in Mcminnville, Oregon, feel free to stop by my office. It's in Walker. Vanessa, if you want to share your email with me, I will get that to you. Okay. Awesome. Vanessa, I will send.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'm feeling inspired.
Email. Oh,